Welcome to NFL Now, presented by the Home Depot. I'm Patrick Claybon. That video sums it all up, an offseason of issues with Antonio Brown and the Raiders. Grambling, Louisiana Tech is in the books. The Bulldogs on top of our first Conference USA game this season on NFL Network, 20-14, the final score there. But again, back to the breaking news that came before the game. Then there was the breaking news that came during the game. It's been a day of breaking news of the same story. One that ended with this: Antonio Brown signing with the New England Patriots, and then Instagramming this photoshopped image of him wearing his 84 jersey, and then reaction pouring in from around the league from his new teammate first. Julian Edelman says 100. Business is booming. So what will business look like once it is first able to boom? Unfortunately for those AB Patriots fans now, he will not be able to play against his former team in week 1 here tomorrow. But week 2, his hometown team, the Miami Dolphins, then he can say hello to Le'Veon Bell. And remember when he was briefly going to be a Buffalo Bill per reports? That didn't happen, but he will have a chance to play them in week 4. Now we've got MJ Acosta, who's been covering this story all day in Alameda, as well as Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. Ian, let's start with you. This deal for Antonio Brown, take us through what the numbers look like.
Well, it is a 1-year deal worth up to $15 million, which, if that sounds pretty familiar, it's about what he was going to make with the Raiders this year had they not tried to void his guarantees, had they not told him he wouldn't get termination pay, had they not told him he was going to go week to week, leading Antonio Brown to say that without guarantees he was just not going to play and asking them to release him. So the Patriots essentially make Antonio Brown whole just over 1 season, and he does get a $9 million signing bonus. That is the guaranteed money that he sought. That's the guaranteed money that he got. And you mentioned he's not allowed to play tomorrow night against his old friend, the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the next week he is allowed to play. It'll be for the Patriots, and everything we have talked about over the last week has been absolutely crazy, and this seems like the sanest thing that's happened.
Ian, this accelerated really quickly, too. You go back to when the Raiders announced a little before noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, that they were releasing Antonio Brown after all the things that had happened over the previous 24 hours. Well, under a new NFL rule that was just approved back in March, teams could legally begin contacting Antonio Brown and his agent Drew Rosenhaus immediately. So roughly 4 hours later, it's a done deal with the Patriots, the 1-year deal worth up to $15 million that you mentioned. I talked to probably 20 NFL teams over the course of the morning about Antonio Brown, and there were all sorts of opinions, from he'll never play again to he's going to go someplace. But several people mentioned immediately the Patriots. It just makes too much sense. A team that needs a wide receiver, a team that feels it can fit its culture to virtually anyone. Well, if anybody's going to be a challenge culture-wise, it is Antonio Brown. The social media presence probably going to change just a bit once he gets to New England.
Well, and Tom and Ian, you mentioned speaking with people across the league saying he'd probably get picked up. That was sort of the sentiment here with a few players that I spoke to. They said, although they certainly wanted it to work out and keep Antonio Brown here in Oakland, they were confident that he would be picked up relatively quickly. I don't think a matter of hours was the time span they had in mind, but certainly knew with a talent like his that another team would come calling and come calling soon. Now, in terms of how the team is sort of pushing on through this, I think it's just the finality has set in, and there's relief now that they can completely focus on what's ahead of them, which is, of course, that primetime game on Monday to start of the season. So many of the guys I spoke to said it may be a big deal outside of these walls, and while it is disappointing to us, we've always remained focused. They've been a tight-knit group this entire time, and all of this has only brought the Raiders players closer.
Yeah, and so the players, and perhaps to a certain extent John Gruden, will be able to move on from this, Ian, but there is still the issue to resolve regarding Antonio Brown's guarantees and a potential grievance. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said earlier on Good Morning Football that he wasn't going to discuss it as it could be a potential legal issue. What can you tell us about the potential of a legal issue?
If that is going to be contested by agent Drew Rosenhaus and by Antonio Brown, it'll be handled by the NFLPA. That is what I'm told. No word yet on whether or not they are going to actually appeal and try to get his guarantees unvoided. But you have to wonder, guys, if him signing for a deal worth up to $15 million with the Patriots does take some of the sting away from the guaranteed money. And by the way, he also still has to pay the fines that the Raiders hit him with, $215,000 for punting the ball, yelling at Mayock and saying, "Fine me for that," plus $50,000+ for missing practice and a walkthrough with the Raiders. A lot of fine money that he still has to pay.
This is also another example of just how talent generally wins. Antonio Brown is a remarkably talented player. He's been highly productive in the NFL for a long time. But you think back just over the past 6 months, or really even going back 9 months to last December when he no-showed in Week 17. The Steelers couldn't find him. He ends up missing their season finale. A series of bizarre instances leading to him wedging his way out of Pittsburgh, gets traded for just a 3rd and 5th round pick to the Raiders, gets a raise, gets guaranteed money. That doesn't work out. Almost the exact same type of a sequence of events takes place. He wedges his way out of Oakland and then almost instantaneously lands with the Patriots. There are not a lot of wide receivers that can do what Antonio Brown can do. This will be a unique test for exactly how well the Patriots culture can adapt to a player like this. But there are some comparisons here to another former Raiders receiver who ended up in New England when Randy Moss went from there, from a different Raiders organization at that point, but went to New England, had one of the great seasons that we've seen in NFL history. The moment Moss exited New England that time, he went back into Minnesota. Within a month, he was telling the owners there that they should fire the head coach. Bill Belichick and his staff have a remarkable ability to work with different personalities and get the most out of just about everybody.
And Tom, you mentioned that X factor that Antonio brings, and that more than anything is exactly why the Raiders organization, the coaches, the front office, and the players themselves work so hard to try to make this work. The support that they put behind Antonio, especially on Friday when he came in and apologized, you could see just from the guys I spoke to in the locker room, even Coach Gruden, how excited they were, that they thought at that point, just yesterday actually, that this was going to work out. And then yet again, we had another mishap, and now, well, he's off to New England. So there's no denying the caliber of his play, but certainly, as Tahir Whitehead said earlier today, one of the captains of this team, when someone doesn't have a team-first mentality, it's never going to work.
And we'll see how it works in the future. We heard from John Gruden earlier today. He said that he wished Antonio Brown the best. It didn't take long. He found the defending Super Bowl champs. We'll see how that plays out. Thanks to MJ Acosta, Ian Rappaport, and Tom Pelissero with the latest on Antonio Brown going to the Patriots here on NFL Now, presented by Home Depot. Here's the Boston Herald cover. Patriots signed troubled 7-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Brown hours after being released by the Raiders. What a catch, the subhead there. Let's go to the phones. Our own Mike Giardi covers the New England Patriots for us here on NFL Network. He joins us now on the phones. Mike, they've had success with a whole lot of people. Here comes Antonio Brown.
Yeah, and I think the reason, Patrick, they've had success with some players of this ilk is because of that culture of accountability. It starts with Belichick, and I remember a story he told back in the day, and I think it's very pertinent to this situation. He said, beginning of his tenure with the Patriots, he's holding a meeting. Player walks in a couple minutes late. And the meeting's already going. And he sits fairly close to the front. And Belichick points at him and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Sorry, Coach. Sorry, I'm late." He said, "Get out. Get out. We're not allowing this to happen." And he said, that sort of, I think, has bridged for the last 20 years how he's approached the leadership and how he wants to set the tone for the team. And, they've had guys come in, whether it be Corey Dillon, Randy Moss. Those guys have worked. And then you can talk about Albert Hainsworth and Chad Ochocinco and Michael Floyd to a lesser degree. And, the jury's still out on Josh Gordon. So they've had some hits and misses, but it's clear that they're willing to take a chance here because they believe strongly in Belichick's power and I think just the overall leadership of that room.
And also, when you've had so much success, Mike, it's pretty easy to do what you want to do and know that not a lot of people are going to question you. As far as getting out on the field and the way that he fits, obviously would be a dream on the field, Antonio Brown working with Josh McDaniels, Tom Brady, and this Patriots offense.
Without question, because you sat there and said, and we've talked about it quite a bit here this summer, is what's the offense going to look like now that you've lost the best bailout option in the league and Rob Gronkowski? Well, adding someone of the talent level of Antonio Brown certainly can help to ease that problem. And, he's obviously the most, I think when you look at their receivers, the most explosive, the most versatile. Then you have Julian Edelman working the middle of the field. You have Gordon with his ability to work comebacks and slants and just overpower people with his size, so that if all those pieces fit and stay together, then you're talking about an offense that may not have nearly the problems and the growing pains that we thought they were going to all summer long.
Yeah, you compare it on paper to historical offenses, you have to go back to another Tom Brady offense that featured another guy who, at the time, was on a Hall of Fame track. That's our Mike Giardi reporting on the New England Patriots, joining us on the phone. Thanks, Mike. Reaction from elsewhere in the league, from non-Patriots. Also, a non-Raider, Jalen Ramsey, just with the crying, laughing emoji. This whole thing has been wild. Wild indeed. Our guy Max Starks was calling the Grambling State against Louisiana Tech game on NFL Network while all of this news was happening. Max, you were with AB early on in his career when he was the guy coming out of Miami, coming out of Central Michigan, just trying to earn a spot. Take us through how far things have come for him personally since 2010, 2011, and all the way until now, and your reaction to what's going on today.
Well, like you said, I saw AB as a young, hungry guy trying to make his way into the lineup of the receiving corps. When you come into a team that has a Hines Ward, that has Mike Wallace at the time, and even an Emmanuel Sanders as well, and those type of guys in front of you, and just work hard. He cut his teeth being a punt returner on this team and a kick returner, and then worked his way up into being the guy that we see today, one of the most electric players at the wide receiver position. You've seen the 100-plus catch seasons and the fast track that he was on in his time with Ben Roethlisberger, to now the upsetting news, and them not getting together at the end of last season, the Week 17 sit-out, which ultimately led for him to ask for his trade, and then the Raiders drama, and then now he ends up in a position, I think, better than when he left the Steelers in New England, the team that has the pedigree, that has the championship caliber personality. You look at the people that are on that team, and I think this is the last chance for AB, in my opinion, but he finally goes to a team that has more clout than he does personally, and I think that's what's going to help kind of curb the tide of that AB's been going through, because you have Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and if you can't listen to and you can't get along with those two guys, then nobody you're going to get along with. So I think it's a very big move, obviously something that we've watched firsthand. He's grabbed the headline since January, and I'm a little upset, just as personal, being a former Steeler, to see him kind of fail upwards towards New England. But I have to say, this New England squad, it changes the odds greatly for this team when you talk about the post-Rob Gronkowski era. Because think about this potential three-man lineup: Julian Edelman, him, and Demaryius Thomas or Philip Dorsett. There's so many receivers. It's going to be a different look for this New England team, and he's going to add that additional kind of caveat for this squad and what they can do offensively.
And Max, you talked about back in 2010, 2011, Antonio really different from the guy who became a perennial Pro Bowler, perennial star in the league, multiple time All-Pro. Looking at the way he approaches things kind of social media-wise, there was the locker room snafu years ago. Do you think that we're just seeing more AB now? He's just more willing to share who he is? Or you feel like he's a different person than he was when he was younger?
Well, I think we've seen this progression, because the one thing that has been constant with AB since he came into the NFL, work ethic. You can never knock the amount of work that this kid will put in on the field after practice, and it's showing up in the game time situations. But I think, like you said, as the notoriety has grown, as his presence has been known on the football field, so has his social media presence, and willing to share more or go beyond what the normal means are of access to Antonio Brown, the person, like you said, with this whole Snapchat/Facebook post in the locker room, to all of the things where he takes to social media to air his kind of stream of thought, so to speak. Very frontal lobe, like just get it out there. And that's where, it's a double-edged sword when you use social media, because it's such a delicate platform that can be used for good, or it can be very detrimental in a lot of situations. And good or bad, he's using that tool to the utmost ability.
And we will see. We've seen the reaction in the past hasn't been too great to his social media. Ultimately, the Patriots concerned with wins and losses. We'll see how he translates here in 2019. Max Starks, fresh off of our Conference USA call. Thanks for coming on, man.
What changed between yesterday and this morning with Antonio?
You know, we just have exhausted everything. We tried every way possible to make it work. And all I'm going to say is, it's disappointing. I'm really proud of our players, our coaches, our owner, our front office. We did everything we could to make this work. And, I'm sorry it didn't. I apologize, but I will tell you I am very proud of what we did as an organization to try. And I wish Antonio nothing but the best. And I'm sorry that we never got a chance to see him in silver and black. Very disappointing in my career as a coach. I really look forward to coaching him, but it's not going to happen. I'm not going to sit here and talk about it all day. We got 12 rookies. We got a lot to be excited about. And I wish Antonio the very best.
So let's look back at some of those things that John Gruden said they did everything for here on NFL Now, presented by the Home Depot. They traded for Antonio Brown back in March. Then he had the frostbite injury from the cryo chamber. He filed and lost 2 helmet grievances. Got a helmet deal with a new helmet. And then he posted a picture of his fines from Mike Mayock. Then he had his video phone call with John Gruden, apologized, got a subsequent fine. They canceled his guarantees, released by the Raiders, and then agrees to terms on a 1-year contract with the New England Patriots for around $15 million. And so he goes on Instagram, and this time it's a Photoshop of him wearing a New England Patriots jersey, #rewrite story. Lots of rewrites throughout this story here on NFL Now today. This most recent one, Antonio Brown, now a Patriot. Our GM, Charlie Casserly, as well as Mike Silver, joining us. Mike, we'll start with you. No more problems in Oakland, at least with regards to Antonio Brown. Now they can look ahead to the matchup on Monday night.
Yeah, John Gruden looked happy in that clip, and the Raiders obviously wish they had not given up the draft picks and gone through these last several months of this saga. And, I don't know if you want to use the word distraction or just something that is a, problematic situation, but you're trying to coach 52 other guys and you've got somebody playing by his own rules. So first of all, I want to preface this and say there have been enough people out there, including our David Carr, who have questioned how rational Antonio Brown is being, whether he is well mentally and emotionally. And I want to keep that in mind as I talk about this, because this is potentially bigger than football. As far as the transactional part of it, him going to the Patriots, I know it's very tempting for people to just say, oh, it was a grand design. Maybe they worked this out. This was all part of the plan. And now he's just going to go there and be Randy Moss in 2007. And I just don't see that happening in any way. You've got a guy who clearly believes the rules don't apply to him and that he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And someone who's hypersensitive. Any criticism, anything that doesn't go his way, any enforcement of the rules leads to an outburst, something public. And so if you think those ingredients, plus the aforementioned erratic behavior, are going to play well in that building, regardless of how strong you think their culture is or how tough and authoritarian you think Bill Belichick is because he kicked a guy out of a meeting one time, I think you're delusional. It might work in the short term. The power of Tom Brady, for instance, and the force of his personality can go a long way. But we're talking about a guy who has to have everything go his way, has to behave in his best rational interests, can't be questioned, has to follow rules that he hasn't been following, and by the way, has to learn a new offense and run the routes the right way, which wasn't always a strong point in Pittsburgh if you talk to people there. Tom Brady's an exacting quarterback. One day I visited training camp there years ago, and to register his displeasure with his offensive lineman, he started mooing, the message being, you guys are cows, you're not moving fast enough. He's a first-rate person who everybody in this league likes, but believe me, his hyper-competitive nature is very, very fierce. And unless Antonio Brown, somehow this was his grand design to act erratic and irrational and insubordinate for months and months, and is now going to flip a switch, this is not destined to end well. And the Patriots can take their applause today, because I don't think it's going to get them anything but misery in the end.
A couple things here. First of all, I'd like to see the wording on the contract. I have a hard time believing this is $9 million if he acts up and acts like he is with the Raiders. Patriots are too smart to sign a contract like that. So there has to be some accountability, if you will, or out clauses in this contract, in my mind, to give him that quote kind of money and expect him to act like he acted with the Raiders. If he had the act he had with the Raiders in training camp, he'd have been fired by the Patriots. So he'll come in here and he'll say all the right things, do all the right things, maybe in the beginning. But here's the thing. When Randy Moss came, Randy Moss quit on Oakland. This guy quit on Oakland, too. They cut Randy Moss's salary by $9 million. I think he played for $2 or $3 million, was a free agent, and he had something to prove. And he came in there and he did everything right. Pretty much everything right, okay? Except sometimes not hustling on the field. And he had a remarkable year. They fired him eventually. As Mike Girardi pointed out, Albert Haynesworth, that didn't work out. Ocho Cinco, that didn't work out. I guess Michael Floyd, he didn't work out. I don't know what kind of investment you put in there. Josh Gordon, to this point, has not worked out. They got him and he got suspended. So he hadn't really played for him yet. So the Patriots, like we said, they're willing to take a chance. This is what you have to evaluate when you take a player like Antonio Brown. You can only take him if you have a strong locker room, a winning culture, and somebody like when Dennis Rodman goes to the Bulls, Michael Jordan's in charge. Rodman was smart enough to figure that out. Is this guy smart enough to figure it out? I don't know. Talked about it this morning myself. David Carr talked about it. Michael Silver just talked about it. There's something, this guy's got some issues now. This may not be just a football player coming to another place like Randy Moss is doing there. Now, from a talent point of view, this guy's maybe the most talented receiver they ever had. He's a better route runner than Moss. He's a more versatile player than Moss. Moss was a rare guy going straight ahead. This guy can go straight ahead. But this guy can move around. You can put him in different positions. So there is some versatility that they haven't had here in a long time.
Yeah, his number one issue going into this past weekend, his team canceling his injury guarantees and asking him to play on a week-by-week basis. One would assume the Patriots, moving forward, would know if they do that, they can expect Antonio Brown to ask for his release. Yet again, our GM, Charlie Casserly, as well as Mike Silver here on NFL Now, presented by the Home Depot. Hey, there's Rich Eisen. His folks upstairs, hey, that's in our building. They were meeting, and then everything changed. They're still working on game day morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time.
I wish Antonio the very best.
Some quick editing on that video encapsulating the entire offseason of stories for Antonio Brown, culminating with this. Antonio Brown in a Patriots jersey, eligible to play for New England, starting in week 2. So what does that group of wide receivers look like for the New England Patriots? Well, there they are. Philip Dorsett, Demaryius Thomas, Josh Gordon, N'Keal Harry, and now including Antonio Brown. Much of the discussion about the Patriots in the offseason was how do they deal with the absence of now retired Rob Gronkowski. Well, now they have Antonio Brown all set to go against Miami in week 2, but a lot could change as we've seen here in the past 24 hours. Our Tom Pelissero and MJ Acosta back with us. The Oakland Raiders have a game coming up on Monday night. MJ, the wide receiver group been working, of course, with and without Antonio Brown for some time. What confidence do you think they have in that group up against Denver?
The players are unwavering in their ability here. They've told me over and over throughout the week and throughout the summer, truly, that they know that they are a good team with or without Antonio, and that the depth they have specifically at wide receiver is strong. I spoke with Tyrell Williams today, and let's not forget that he is a receiver who can play every position there. John Gruden earlier today responded to my question about the strength of his offense, saying that they're really confident in what they have, and especially at the tight end position with Darren Waller, who has been one of the strongest guys out there before even training camp began. And of course, at running back, you have Josh Jacobs, who told me earlier today that he feels leaner, stronger, and faster than he ever has. He feels absolutely ready to take on the NFL pace. He actually was pleasantly surprised with how quickly he has picked up this offense and is ready to literally hit the ground running on Monday night.
And Tom, looking over at the deal Antonio Brown signed with the Patriots, our GM, Charlie Casserly, was wondering what the guarantee structure might look like. What do you think, and what have you heard about that deal and how it may play out for Brown in New England?
Well, Antonio Brown gets a $9 million signing bonus from the Patriots, so that is naturally guaranteed. It maxes out at $15 million, which means that's some combination of their $6 million of base salary, potential per-game roster bonuses, as well as incentives. This also impacts something we've been talking throughout the day about, which is, will Antonio Brown file a grievance against the Raiders over the nearly $30 million in guarantees that the team informed him yesterday, which sparked this entire thing, that they were voiding based upon his conduct, and specifically that incident with general manager Mike Mayock. Well, I reviewed Antonio Brown's contract here within the past few minutes. It contains what is known as offset language. That is standard language in a lot of teams' contracts that says if we cut you, even if there is guaranteed money left on your contract, any money you earn from another team is subtracted from the amount we owe you. So even if they were making the argument now on Antonio Brown's side and his agent Drew Rosenhaus that Antonio Brown should be entitled to that $30 million regardless of his conduct, the $9 million signing bonus already slashes about a third of that out. Any money he would earn additionally this year, any money he would earn in 2020, that would all count against the number. In the end, the money the Raiders would have owed him, probably not going to be a big issue here. What exactly becomes of the fines, that's still a story that perhaps the Raiders will have a little bit more to say about.
And we'll see how that turns out. But at least until Monday, Oakland doesn't have to worry about Antonio Brown and perhaps answering questions about him. Tom Pelissero, MJ Acosta with us with the latest on AB, as well as his former team. Speaking of his former team, they announced their captains, Rodney Hudson, LaMarcus Joyner, of course, Vontaze Burfict, as well as Tahir Whitehead. Folks, it's time for Build Your